Republicans applaud Governor John Kasich's new budget.
And in some parts of the world are actually saying it is a comeback for Ohio.
The budget includes deep income tax cuts paid for in part by an increase in the state's sales tax.
It certainly doesn't play to ordinary consumers.
The income tax versus the sales tax. Who wins and who loses? We'll ask our newsmaker, Budget Director Tim Keene.
Plus, pro-life advocates declare victory.
We continue to have pro-life majorities in the House and Senate. It should come as no surprise.
Pro-choice advocates say Kasich is now target number one.
He just reaffirmed his front seat position in the war on women.
While a leading pro-choice lawmaker announces her bid for Secretary of State.
Ladies and all the supporters of choice, we will not creep. We will continue to soar.
What issues are driving State Senator Nina Turner to run? She'll join us.
Plus, the top political issues of the week debated by our strategists Terry Casey and Sam Gresham, all coming up on Capitol Square.
Good morning and welcome to Capitol Square. I'm Tracy Townsend.
Hi everybody, I'm Jim Heath. Governor John Kasich put his signature on the line, approving the two-year state budget, certainly a much different budget than the one he signed just a couple years ago that contained deep cuts as Ohio fought its way out of the national recession.
Not everyone happy about it, though. Kasich did not veto any anti-abortion bill in the budget, upsetting women's rights groups, but he did veto the elimination of Medicaid expansion, upsetting conservatives. Still, he says it's a budget he's proud of.
The rates are too high in Ohio. I know some do not understand this, but what we intend to do is we intend to emphasize incentives for those who take risks, those who create jobs, and for those who work. And we believe that that consumption being rewarded is not the smartest economic policy because our economic policy is designed to grow jobs. For those that criticize this tax plan, most of them are the ones that delivered us a $350,000 unemployment bill and an $8 billion hole when we came in.
The architect of the state budget is State Budget Director Tim Keene. Mr. Keene, welcome back to Capitol Square.
Glad to be here.
All right, so let's start first with, you were here just a few months ago as this budget process got started and said that you would get most of the budget passed through this Republican legislature. But at the end of this, no Medicaid expansion, no severance tax on big oil, education funding was completely changed, and there is no expansion of the state sales tax. Do you recognize this budget?
I tell you, the governor had 5 major objectives for this budget, and I tell you, 4 are significantly contained in the bill that he signed, and the 5th, the Medicaid extension of benefits, is something the legislature has pledged to continue to work on this summer, and the governor will continue to fight for.
So satisfied. I mean, you've got, basically, even though you wanted a 20% income tax cut as an example, there's enough of a cut to satisfy you and the governor.
A 10% reduction in the personal income tax cut and a 50% reduction in small business taxes will be a significant benefit to Ohioans. $2.7 billion net tax reduction over the next 3 years will help bolster Ohio's economic growth.
And you've been through this budget process a number of times over the years. What would you say is different about the process this time?
Well, I tell you, the governor unveiled a very aggressive agenda covering a wide range of issues. These 5 major issues I mentioned, Medicaid, education funding, higher education funding, the turnpike, and tax reform. Any one of these could have been the centerpiece and has been the centerpiece of past budgets. And the governor wanted to take all these issues on because there's a lot of work to be done to keep Ohio moving forward. And that makes it challenging for the legislature.
Tim, let me ask you sort of the philosophy in this budget between the income tax cut and the sales tax increase, because right away critics pounced on this, and it's likely to be a campaign theme. We asked our good friend Paul Beck from the Ohio State University, who has watched a lot of these budget processes, as you know, through the years, and here's actually his response to this debate.
I think it does play to an upper income audience who believes they are overtaxed in large part, fairly or not. They don't like progressive taxes particularly, and so they're going to see a considerable tax cut with this. It certainly doesn't play to ordinary consumers who, particularly these days in an economy that's not fully recovered, are probably paying a much higher share of their income for just consumption goods. And so there is that kind of change, that trade-off, where upper income people are going to benefit, lower income people are not going to benefit.
All right, and we're likely to hear that. That's from Paul Beck. Democrats are already on this. As I said, probably a campaign theme through the next year. These income tax cuts favor the wealthy. Sales tax increase hurts the middle class and poor. How do you respond to that kind of philosophically?
It is generally recognized by economists that income taxes are harmful to economic growth. Consumption taxes are less harmful to economic growth. Ohio is over-reliant on income taxes, frankly, both at the state and local level. So the idea is to shift to away from income taxes to consumption taxes. Income taxes then freeing up money to be invested by small businesses in order to create jobs, and then all Ohioans can benefit.
So do you disagree with the premise that the income tax, the wealthier Ohioans benefit more than the sales tax where it hurts poor and middle class? I mean, you just disagree with that premise?
Well, the idea, we need to focus on growing Ohio's economy, because as Ohio's economy grows, all Ohioans will benefit.
So the income tax cut would be help spur jobs, help create jobs.
Absolutely. But furthermore, I would point out that 10% of Ohioans in the top two income tax brackets pay 60% of Ohio income taxes. And so when folks are paying a significant tax bill, a across-the-board tax cut that everyone benefits from equally at 10% will yield greater tax relief for folks who are paying more taxes.
I think one of the things that we saw everybody agree on both sides of the aisle, at least a small group, is that this budget had a lot of policy issues. And we saw, when you were here last, it was Medicaid expansion everybody was talking about. Then, of course, it turned to abortion rights. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on that sort of issue being in the budget.
I tell you, the budget has traditionally been a vehicle for major policy discussions in the state. And because in so many instances, the allocation of state resources drives that policy. And we can debate about which elements ought to be in the budget or not. The governor's focus was on getting Ohio's fiscal house in order and trying to focus on policies that create jobs for Ohio. And I think that this budget accomplishes that.
Tim, explain to me just briefly, if you can, the $13 billion for Medicaid expansion. How that would that still come into this budget if it does pass by the end of the year?
Well, the $13 billion in federal money that Ohio would benefit over the 7-year period of time, the window that we were looking at for Medicaid extension, there's still time for Ohio to pass some legislation to participate in the Medicaid extension program. January 1 is when the program kicks off, and so if there's action this summer or early fall, we will be able to be in the program and get the benefit of those federal dollars to serve Ohioans. The governor will continue to work very hard with the legislature to take actions that are necessary so that Ohio can participate in the program on January 1, 2014.
I wanted to ask you, on behalf of all the families with children in schools in the state, can you explain how the education funding cuts were changed and how that's going to benefit our children?
Well, this budget commits $1.5 billion new dollars for schools over this next 2-year budget period of time. This budget provides state resources that put state support by any measure above the levels that were in place at the time that Governor Kasich took office. So the state support that we've been able to provide because of a growing economy puts our total state spending above the levels that existed prior to the governor taking office.
30 seconds left. Tim, let me ask you just briefly. There was a lot of money left in that rainy day fund, local governments that were cut in the last budget that was passed. Wondering if some of that could come back. What's your response? Any more possibility for funding for local governments?
I tell you, this budget will provide approaching $14 billion in support for local government through all funding sources. The local government fund is only $350 million, about 2% of that. The local governments are best served by the state being fiscally stable, so we don't need to make mid-year budget reductions that would impact them after they've already had their budget in place.
All right. State Budget Director Tim Keene, thanks for coming back.
Take a
Tracy,
deep breath.
Jim, thank you.
Take a deep breath. Your work is done, at least for a little while.
Right.
All right, coming up, an outspoken lawmaker announces her bid for statewide office. Why is State Senator Nina Turner running? We'll ask her when she joins us next.
And there's always something going on in Ohio politics, and you can be part of the discussion. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, or log on to 10tv.com/Capital Square.